Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hannah, the first person with the camera off. I respect that. We'll give everyone a minute or two to jump in here, and then I'll get kind of going on this. As most of you know, I'm Sherelle. I work on customer onboarding and success here at Arrows. And we have Alan with us from our marketing team, who's been helping put these together and actually get invites out and get everyone going. So there might be another person or two from our team joining, but we're going to start doing more of these. Focused sessions versus just the general getting started with arrow session. So as you go through this, one, share any feedback and thoughts, but also feel free to drop in the chat if you have other topics or things you'd want to see covered in the future. And then we do have, Alan, if you want to go to the next slide, I think you're sharing your screen. Just a couple quick housekeeping rules before I jump in. We normally don't do these in Zoom. We use a different webinar tool, but this one ended up being already scheduled on Zoom. So for the sake of everyone else here, feel free to keep your cameras off or on, up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. Throughout the session, please just keep your mics muted. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'll be looking there back and forth just to answer stuff. We will definitely share a recording of this by the end of the week. And the goal is to try to keep it within the 30 minutes. We do have some extra time at the end to hang out if people do have specific questions, but I will, most of you know, I talk a lot, but I will try to keep it within the 30-minute window here. And then, like I said earlier, there's a ton of ideas and topics that I'm sure are swirling through your minds. If you have them, feel free to either leave it in the chat at the end of here or send us an email at help@arrows for any future kind of topics or sessions you want covered, because we're going to try to do more and more of these as we go. Cool. I'll share my screen and get right into it then. So today what we want to cover is, as you all know, Arrows integrates heavily with HubSpot, and a lot of that means the data points that we give you also get sent to HubSpot, which then you can use for reports, dashboards, automations, workflows, all sorts of stuff. Today I want to specifically show you how to build 3 high-level reports using that Arrows data. I'm definitely going to get through 2 of them. I'm going to try to get through 3, but the one I want to touch on is this graph here, onboarding by status and start month, so you can get a sense of over time which of your records in HubSpot have a plan attached to them and where they are in terms of their plan status. This gauge chart, which kind of is used to understand the average days to onboarding completion based on a couple data points. And you can obviously make this accustomed to your time frame or that's
So,
part of why
yeah,
we added data points the way we did, so that you can be flexible with how you use them in HubSpot for this kind of information. And then if time permits, I want to also go through this one where we can kind of highlight which customers have overdue tasks. And then being able to identify them and act on them. There's a bunch of other reports in here too, so if any of these pique your curiosity, what Al and I are going to try to do is also record individual videos on a lot of these and start emailing those out as well. But those are the 3 I want to touch on today. Part of this starts with the Arrows side. So from the Arrows side, as most of you know, you can sync data to HubSpot depending on which object you are using for your onboarding plans, whether it's deals, tickets, the service record, which is now available, and or custom objects. This integrations tab will have a sync data point. And then regardless of what tier you're on, every report I show today should encompass all the data points you need. I actually realized this morning 2 of the reports I am going to show do have 2 data points that aren't on our current growth tier, but I asked our product team to add them, so they will be moved over in the near future here so that you can actually build all these reports I'm about to show you. Specifically, they're the ones for plan start dates, plan statuses, and I'll touch on the individual ones in a second here. But the finish date and the start date weren't up here in the recommended section. They will be in the future. So you might have to sync that over, but otherwise you should be able to set up everything I'm about to show you. So the first one I want to show is this onboarding by status and start month. And some of this is contingent on what access you have in HubSpot to be able to actually create reports and create dashboards. Depending on if you can or can't do that, you might need to get your admin involved. But essentially what you're doing is building 3 different reports using some of that data and then putting them into what HubSpot calls these customer dashboards. So for this first one, if I look at the settings of this actual report, it's basically one of these vertical bar chart types, and we're looking at a different cut of that arrow's plan status. So each plan has a status. They are active, complete, failed, or archived. Ultimately, the definition of what you say for failed or archived is up to you. We leave that kind of blank intentionally. But active means the plan is being worked on, and then complete means you have actually moved it to the complete status and or every task is done on the plan. So to set this one up, if I jump into my custom report builder here, and if you're unfamiliar, let me go back one more step here. The one I'm using for this is custom reports. I believe single objects will also work. I think custom reports get unlocked on certain tiers of HubSpot, but most of these are only referencing the onboarding record as the object. So single object reports should also work. I use tickets in this demo account. So depending on what you're using, that's the data source you'll want to use. The difference between single object and custom reports is you can add multiple data points for custom reports, but I'm still going to only use tickets in this case. So for that bar one, I have some notes here on the side, so I might be peeking back and forth. But essentially what I'm doing is adding a bar graph with that status as the main breakdown piece. So in here, once you have those data points synced, you can search for Arrow's plan status, I believe it's called. And we're going to use that as the breakdown here. And then for the x-axis, what I was looking at was the month the record was created. So I was actually using the ticket create date. You can also use the plan create date. That's another data point that you have in there. But I'm going to use the created date for the actual ticket. So when you are looking at a specific object and you search created, it'll give you the create date for that specific ticket. And that's what I want my x-axis to be here. And then for the y-axis, the way I was looking at it in that chart was by just the number of tickets or count of tickets, which is usually at the default measures here at the top, where you can always search count. This is going to be a surprise what pulls into here because we're looking at real data in my demo account. But you can see here, it starts to pull in some of those points for you. Always name your reports in HubSpot. I'm going to save it as I go. You can also, if you want to add it to a dashboard view, we can do it here as an example. This screen will give you the option to add to new dashboard, or you can choose not to add it yet. I'm going to do this now and then come back here just for the sake of showing you this. And it'll keep me in here, but it'll let me go to that dashboard in a second. So now I have a general report set up. The other things that you'll want to do on your reports is filter information on here. So if you have a onboarding pipeline, which most of you do in HubSpot, one of the best filters to use is the pipeline name. So if I pull in pipeline here, you can drag and drop that in here as a filter. And then I want to only look at pipelines in my, or tickets in my onboarding pipeline. So you can do is any of, and then pick your actual pipeline. Forget which ones actually have tickets in them. I'll use this one for now. But I'm basically honing this information down to a much more small subset versus every single ticket in my HubSpot instance. I only want to care about the ones that are in my onboarding pipeline. Another way to go about this is to do a status for arrows is known. And then you'll know that essentially those tickets also do have a onboarding plan attached to them. So if this one is the arrows plan status that we're already using, I can also say here is known and apply that. And that guarantees that those tickets specifically have some sort of onboarding plan actually attached to them. Then you can go a layer deeper even on the status one here and say not is only known, but you can say is active. and that'll only show me plans that have an active plan status now tied to them. And then the last kind of thing you can do within here is to, actually, just kidding, take that back. You don't want to make this active. Well, you can make it active if you want, but I actually want to see all the different statuses pulled into here, not just my active plans, because then it lets me get a sense of which ones are failed, completed, and so on. But the other filter that I like adding to this one is a time range. So you can do like a created within the last 6 months or created within the last quarter, kind of contingent on what you want to see in here. For now, I'll leave this as is, but that's another filter you can add additionally in here if you wanted to make this only onboarding plans this quarter or this year or this calendar year. And then the last thing that looks a little bit different than what I had in here were these colors. So the other option inside of the chart settings here are to actually adjust what these different colors represent. Ultimately, that depends on what you want to make this look like. I like complete being blue, active being green, and failed being red. And ultimately, what this lets me do once you save it and add it to your dashboard here is, one, get a quick, as a leader of onboarding and success here at Arrows, I can quickly get a sense of where customers are in that process. But what's also nice about these graphs when you actually save them is, if I jump back to one that's built out here now, when you click on any of these sections, it also gives you a quick understanding of which customers are in there. So for example, if I'm looking back in January 2024, why are there still active plans? Maybe it's bad hygiene. Maybe this onboarding process really is a year and a half long, but then I can see which customers are in that section. I can open that record, jump to their actual ticket, and get a better sense of where they are or who they are if I just need to update my personal hygiene in HubSpot. So that's the first one that I want to touch on. You can also add additional data into this view if you wanted to. When you're pulling in those columns, if you remember, I only pulled in plan status. You could pull in ticket owner or record owner or other information that you want to see here. And that way you or the team or the people doing the day-to-day can also jump in and out of here and actually see, all right, cool. If I want to care about the customers that are active in July, who are they? How do I act on them? And what are kind of my next steps in that process? So that's the first one I wanted to touch on. I will look at this one next, average days to onboarding. This one's a little bit more simple to set up, and I know I'm going kind of fast because I want to stay within our time frame here, but again, we'll share this recording and be available for questions. This one is a gauge chart type, and it really just needs one data point in here, but this is a specific property that you have to set up in HubSpot to make it work. And if I go into my onboarding properties, so I created a custom property for my ticket record here, called it days to onboarding completion. And when you're setting up the field type for it, you want to do a calculated property and do a time between. And then what you can use is this essentially just starts to do some math for you on the time between two certain moments in time. So I'm using the create date of that ticket again as the start date, and then the arrow's finished date as the end date. The finish date is one of those properties that is currently not on the growth and recommended tier that our team is going to add. So if this one looks unfamiliar to you, it's because it's not synced over yet. But what this property represents is when the plan status gets changed to complete, there's an additional data point that gets added to plans, and that's what this actually is. So unlike the plan start and stop date, which are, or start and target date, which are preset, this one gets set when the status changes to complete. That way, what I'm saying here is I want to know how long it took from the start of that onboarding record to that actual status changing to complete. And then this property behind the scenes is just doing that math for me, and it is its own property. So when I jump into this report, what I'm doing is essentially searching that days to onboarding property, putting it in here as a value, and then picking the gauge type here, and then also changing this to average instead of, I believe it starts as none or distinct count. But what I'm saying is I want to see the average number of days that represented by that property across, and then when I jump into my filters here, across tickets that have closed this year and where the plan status is complete. So now what this is actually showing me is for Arrow's plans that have a completed status, how long on average did it take from that record being created to the moment in time where that onboarding status was set to complete. And depending on your onboarding world, you can then determine, is this too high? Is this in par with what we're trying to do? And so on. The other way I've seen people use this is then to start breaking it down by different onboarding segments. So if you're doing, high level complex implementations versus quick onboarding types, you might not want those averages all in one place. So another filter to think about or consider here would be just adding segments in here or breaking it down by onboarding types. Arrow's template name is another one of those data points that can be synced over. So if you're using specific templates to represent those individual onboarding types, this could be another filter you layer in here and then see that context. But then if I were to jump in here to show you building that one, go back to your reports section in HubSpot, create a new report up here, pick your single object or custom object reports. And once you set up the property, this one's relatively easy. You're essentially just searching for that property. Days to onboarding completion is what I had called it. Actually switch to your gauge here first, and then pull in your value. And like I said, it starts it on a different variation, so you probably don't want it to sum. And if you change it to average and apply that, it'll look a little bit more like what we were just looking at. And then you want to come in here and add some of those filters again. So I'm going to add the status filter as one of my options. I'm going to change that to is any of, for the status property specifically, you have to type in the values and just make sure to type it in correctly, and then it'll apply it. So active or complete. I want to use this one for completed plans only. And I can see here, it starts to add that main graph and starts to pull in my average. And this still looks a little bit different than what I showed you. So what you also want to do is come into the chart settings, and then to give it that view here of these different sections. If I go back here into my chart settings, essentially what you're telling it is to build these bands and say from X to X, I want it to look green or healthy or whatever, again, you define as that good or bad in your world. So when you're back on actually building that, what you can do is add your thing here, change it to days if that's what you want to measure it by, and then you can add your bands from 0 to 20, for example, 20 to 40, and so on. So depending on your onboarding time length, you can kind of adjust these bands, adjust the colors again. On certain tiers of HubSpot, I believe you can get into your own branded colors here or custom colors. I don't think I have that here in my demo account, but I'll do my best version of green, yellow, and red. And you can see now the graph starts to populate itself. Our average happened to be higher than what I was showing here. And I don't have any that go into this, so it's not updating that for me. I think if I do this, though, it should pull me back into that range. So once you have your bands figured out, add your min and max here, and then your graph will look a lot more like the one I just showed in the demo account. And again, you want to give this a name. And now when you save it, you can add it to an existing dashboard that we had just created. I forget what I called it, training. And then since now we have two reports in there, if I actually go to that dashboard, you can start to see they get built out in kind of more of that view that I was showing you initially. And what's nice is once you have a dashboard, you can actually drag and drop and make these look the way you want and fit in a more presentable pattern you want. The other thing I love about dashboards here is you can also schedule them to be sent. Like we schedule them to go out to our leadership team, and every week they receive a version of this dashboard, and then they can come in here and look at what's pertinent to them. Or if you start to add advanced filters, you can do things like only show me Sherelle's tickets in this world or only show me Alan's tickets in this world. So once the dashboard is live, it's essentially just an interactive version of whatever that report is. It's easier to access and get to. And then from here, you can edit all these reports as well. If you're jumping into the doc menu there, you can customize and it takes you back to that editing screen we were just on. One pro tip, if you are, I've messed this up many a times. If you're just trying to edit stuff, you can update the existing report. If you want to actually save it as a new report, you can also from here save, like make some edits or change your filters like we were talking about, and then save it as a brand new report going forward. So that was the gauge one to give you that average days to onboarding completion. Let me just check the chat to see if there are any questions. There's one question about being recorded. Yes, it is. Okay, and then I'm gonna try to squeeze this last one in here too, since we do have a few minutes left, and then we can jump into some questions if folks have them. But this last one is for identifying where customers have overdue onboarding tasks. And this is considered a table report. This is honestly the one I probably use the most when doing any sort of reporting in HubSpot, just because it essentially lets you put data inside of a table and then put in whatever columns and rows you care about. And this, they have summarized and unsummarized tables. I tend to use the unsummarized version more often because it breaks it out into these individual worlds. And then I'm going to show you a basic version of this, but you can obviously add whatever columns or other data that you want in here. And again, part of the reason we built arrows the way we did is you can use our handful of data points in here that you care about, but also anything else that already lives in HubSpot if you want to display that information in here as well. So for this report type, if I jump back to building a new report here, go back to my reports section, create another report. So I'm going to pick this table type here, and I'm going to start dragging in some of those data points that I cared about. And again, we're doing this one to hone in on customers that have overdue tasks, which is another one of those data points that is synced from arrows. And so actually I'll start by filtering it to there first. So if you search arrows overdue tasks, that's the property that represents a number field, and this will tell you how many tasks are overdue within a given plan. And I believe the filter we were using is equal to or greater than 1. So this would say, as long as there's 1 or more overdue tasks, I want to see that in this report. If 1 is too aggressive, you can make that higher, depending on, again, how your due dates are structured and set up. But for the sake of this, I want to basically know that there are overdue tasks, and I actually only care about it if the arrow's plan status is active. I don't want to see that for completed tasks or completed plans. So now I'm zoning in on only active plans and ones that have overdue tasks that we know of. And I'm going to go back to my table here and start adding some data from my columns. The other reason I like these table reports is because they're essentially the easiest ones to set up. So all you're really doing is pulling in data from that you care about and then putting it in here. So I think I had the ticket name as one. I'll put that in as a column. I had the ticket owner, so I can know who is working on that onboarding plan. Then again, this was more so I'm already going to only show plans that have overdue tasks, but I want to see other context about them. I think I want to know what the task name is that they're currently working on. I want to see who is assigned to that task, so you can pull in the arrows task assignee. And then the other property, I believe now it's called days on task, which is a count of how many days has that customer been on that current task. So what this is telling me is I know these customers have overdue tasks. I want to know which task they're on and for how many days they've been on that specific task versus just caring about the overdue task. This helps me understand a little bit deeper of, okay, they are they are overdue tasks, so they are stuck in some sort of way, and I want to know how many days they're on this task. Another cut of this version I've seen people set up is going in on this as a filter. So saying, I only want to know if it's been greater than X number of days. So in your world, it might actually take customers 2 weeks to complete a certain task, and that's okay. But you want to care about ones that are been on the same task for more than 30 days type of thing. So you can filter in a little bit more specifically there. And you can see here, this is again pulling in a million things. So add another filter for your pipeline. And I want to know only the ones that are in my onboarding pipeline again. So now this is going to be a little bit more focused. And now I have that report set up. One kind of cool trick I learned recently is you can actually make these clickable. So in this version of the report that I was showing you in my actual dashboard initially, you can see the name in the table, but you can't actually click on it. So it's a little bit annoying to jump to those actual reports. One thing I learned recently is it's called the record ID. And if you search for the record ID here and add that as a column, it still shows you the ticket name, but then it also makes it a clickable um, input, which then from that report screen, you can actually click this and go directly to that onboarding ticket. So it saves you a step of opening the report and jumping around. And then you could remove this ticket name and not have duplicative data in there. But now I have the report set up. And then the last thing in this specific graph was this conditional formatting on the days. I don't think I can actually show that in here because of how bad this demo data is. Or was I? But the way you would go about doing that is going to chart settings and adding a conditional formatting on a specific column. And you would search the column you want to do it on. So arrows days on task. And you can see here it starts to break this down, and you can add kind of like we did on that other graph that shows the different colors for the different columns. You can start to say, I actually want this to go from green, yellow to red, or red, yellow to green, depending on how you want to visualize this. And let's add a midpoint here for orange. So now it'll look at the data in there and identify the green ones as the lower range, the yellow ones as the mid range, and the red ones as the high range of that column that you're sorting. So it kind of visualizes what is good versus bad. And this is just doing it automatically based on that data set, but you can break this down further and say if it's been X days, it is good. If it's been X days, it is bad. Jarring demo data here. So if someone's really been on the same task for 488 days, but that should be alarming and scream out some sort of, hey, check this out. Go a little bit deeper on this and understand why. Again, is it hygiene? Is it truly a customer who's stuck? And so on. So I'll add this one to our report too. But since we are at time here, I will shut up for a second. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts on any of that, I know that again was quick, but we'll share the recording so you can slow it down and follow along. Hopefully that was helpful and it gives you a little bit of taste of what you can do with some of those data points. Once it's in HubSpot, again, the advantage is you can add whatever columns you want in here, whatever filters you want in here, whatever different cuts of data you want to see in here. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute. I'll hang out for another 10 or 15 minutes or so. And also, if that felt too rushed, definitely let me know because I want to make sure that we can spend more time covering what's helpful.
I don't think we'll have questions,
Cool.
which is a good
Then
sign, I guess.
we'll follow up with this recording.
Yeah.
And then look out for some more of these sessions in the future where we'll cover more topics. And again, if you have other questions or thoughts that you want to see covered in that email that Alan sends up as a follow-up, feel free to respond to that and just share your thoughts or inputs on future topics. Thanks, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone.